Good afternoon, everyone. How was lunch? How was breakfast? Good. Any complaints? Included food, pretty hard to complain about, right? Quick story, and I'll make the introduction, give the mic to Mike, and I'll get out of the way. Ross Jacobson just is sitting in the front row here from Park Industries, reminded me of a great Mike Pagán story. So we're out the Microsoft campus. We walk into this presentation. We go through the food line, him and I. And me, I'm ADD and I need coffee. Coffee is my fuel. I'm behind Mike Pagán in line. And I adore Mike. We've been together for too long, Mike would say. And I'm not really paying attention. But we get to the end of the food line. Mike's got a heaping pile full of food. And he realizes he needed something to wash it down. He pulls up to the pop and soda trays. And there's everything imaginable under the sun that he can get to drink. Coke, Diet Coke, Mountain Dew, Mellow Yellow. What does he pick? Server guy, keep it in mind. He picks a can of Fresca. It just made me laugh. Like today, Fresca's a thing that's on the comeback, and Mike was the leading edge of the Fresca comeback, right? So it made me laugh. Sorry. Second observation is I'm standing up here talking to Mike, and I don't know how you do it with the bright light, so I'm off to the one side. His first slide is all about him, right? So what am I doing here to make an introduction? I don't know the answer to it, but I don't know how you do this, Mike. So
You don't have to read that whole thing. It's crazy.
well, you wrote it.
I thought it was going to go on the website and not be read in front of every presentation. It's like this long.
I give grace that I can read, Mike, so I will do as good a job as I can setting this up. How many FlexCares do we have in the room? FlexCare, managed services agreements with Network Center. Good. A few hands. Are you guys familiar? I know it's annoying, but FlexCare fact, right? Anybody heard the vCISO one from this morning? Network Center has become hyper-focused on cybersecurity for us and for our customers, and we've added several new packages into FlexCare. I'm going to read this because I can't remember it. I'm a little nervous, so it'll not come out the right way, especially after ripping on Mike like I owe you an apology later. vCISO, it's a new service offering within FlexCare. On a quarterly basis, you'll have a security engineer look at and scan of your environment to assist with vulnerabilities, compliance, configurations, and overall security awareness. It's a fantastic service. If you don't have it on site, it's something that we're beginning to offer and a high degree of success. So, session title today, Inside a Cybersecurity Attack, Anatomy, Impact, and Response. Our presenter is none other than Mike Pagán, Senior Solution Architect, Azure Product Engineer for NCI. He's been here a long period of time. I adore Mike. He's very good at his job. We have similar snarky, sarcastic senses of humor. So if you get some humor from Mike, you're blessed to have known him both technically as well as professionally. I'm going to read his bio really quick here. Over the past 25 years, Mike has worked in many areas of information technology and uses this experience to design and install solutions for our customers. You clearly wrote this. A majority of his experience is in a server software and hardware technology such as VMware Sphere, Microsoft products, Exchange Server, Windows Server, Active Directory. I'm out of breath, Mike. Remote desktop services and virtual desktops. Along with his server experience, he works with Cisco networking, Cisco virtual apps and desktops, Veeam backup and recovery. Holy crap, Mike. And various server and storage hardware. Most recently, Mike has been designing and implementing cloud services, including Microsoft Azure, Microsoft 365, and Azure Active Directory. Mike, I would also say that you have been employing Network Center to improve our cybersecurity posture and abilities, and I give you credit for that. On top of all of that, Mike's a heck of a good guy. He's a good dad, good husband, really good employee, really good friend. So Mike, with that, you can now introduce yourself again. So I appreciate it, Mike. Thank you.
So I was asked to write a bio, and I figured it'd go on the website. I didn't know it was going to be read before every presentation, so I'm going to fix that next year. It's going to be like 3 things. So about me, we kind of covered most of that kind of stuff. This is my NASCAR slide. If you don't know NASCAR, that's the cars go really fast, but they can't turn right. So a bunch of the stickers, certifications, or training stuff that I've gone through. I have 3 kids, 2 cats, and a tortoise. How does any sane person end up owning a pet that's going to outlive them? Well, my son, all my kids now are in Scouts, went to a merit badge activity. He did amphibian and reptile study, and about a week later, I own a tortoise and about $500 worth of terrarium and tortoise stuff. So I gave myself, I'm also a Scoutmaster, I gave myself the reptile and amphibian study merit badge because why should he get it? I should get it too, I feed him. And you'd think that tortoises don't lead interesting lives. We let the tortoise outside in the sun so he can, get a tan, I guess. But one day, he decided to get out and go walkabout. And you don't think they'd go very fast, but on my Ring camera, he went about 30 feet in about a minute. So he went walkabout for about 3 days, and we found him, luckily, as he was trying to cross a road, which is not a good idea. So now I get myself search and rescue merit badge. And and honestly, tortoises don't really do much, so I figured I wouldn't include this goofy story as a part of it. But this August, it rained like 3 inches in like an hour, and my basement flooded. So we had a safe pour board. So I gave myself the life-saving merit badge too. So, and now my NASCAR slide is full. So what we're going to talk about is what is a cybersecurity incident and compared to an event. Incidents bad, events not necessarily bad. An incident response model, if you haven't gone into policy and looked at any of those really nerdy things, at least have an example of what that looks like. We're going to look at a sample incident timeline. If you've never been through a cybersecurity incident, it's easy to think that I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to talk to somebody and we're going to start working on it right away. That is not what happens. So it's getting better, but I've had that type of scenario take 36 hours before you could actually start getting an IR team involved and start working on something. And that is a bad feeling when you're not getting assisted in that situation. And then you're kind of doing a scenario and talking through one of the timelines. So an event versus an incident. An event is something like logged or alerted, somebody signing in incorrectly, 5 times. There's an alert in, if you have Arctic Wolf services, you'll get an email saying somebody's locked out their account. Okay, that's an event. Everybody mistypes their password. So it could be anything like that, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to start an incident response. You're going to call your cybersecurity company and do those types of things. An incident is any confirmed compromise or threat to access. If you know malware was run on a system, if you know your CFO's credentials were stolen and something was installed on their computer, that's an incident. That's something to spin up your response to that. It doesn't all have to be, 5-alarm fire, that kind of stuff, but that is definitely something okay, let's lock down this workstation. Let's hopefully have a policy. Let's go through steps to make sure it isn't spreading. Let's pay attention. So that's kind of the difference between an event and an incident. So question time. What is the average downtime in let's say a ransomware event? Anybody have a guess? Okay, a week? A month? 6 weeks? So I found this slide. It's a little bit old. I didn't find an updated one, but 24 days. That's bad. So, and depending on the type of response, it depends on what ends up happening to your business. If your incident response team comes in and realizes it's just this particular thing, you get back to normal business to a point a little faster than that. In my experience, it isn't 24 days, and it isn't everything, right? But there's been plenty of incidents, I think the city of Memphis, there's always some city, state and local government, they got hit. They didn't do anything for 6 weeks. Absolutely nothing happened. So that is obviously the number between all types of incidents. Luckily, the things that I've seen, they're not quite that bad. I found this slide when doing some research, and I think it's important because we always focus on phishing, like somebody coming and stealing our credentials and logging in. CFOs, anybody who handles money, doing wire transfers, that kind of stuff, they're obviously a big target, but that's targeted. With 2024, this is Verizon's big security report they put out. exploitation of vulnerabilities surpassed phishing, which means if you don't have your stuff patched, that is more likely to be a vector when somebody gets in. Now, phishing is obviously still a way to get in, but credential abuse is going down because there's more things in like 365 and that kind of stuff to auto log out your accounts, or hey, this is impossible travel, that kind of stuff. So that's going down, but now they're targeting your stuff and not your people. Now, your people are still really important. They need to pay attention to that kind of stuff, but now they're targeting your things. So what does a cybersecurity incident look like? This is the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain. They invented it or documented it a long time ago, but nowadays people, the bad actors they're doing research. If you are, it's not just a sending out emails to billing places. If you are targeted, they're reconning your environment. They're looking at you on LinkedIn. They're looking at your social media posts. They're maybe calling your company and finding more information about it. They're looking for job openings, that kind of stuff, to try to figure out what type of technology you use and who's working there. I've talked to a company that all of their employees are getting text messages with malicious links in them. I've never seen that before. And even new employees. So some way, shape, or form, they're figuring out the new employee cell phone numbers. I don't know how that's going, why that's happening. They'll weaponize some sort of malware. They'll figure out, based on what they think you have in your environment, they're going to pick something to get access to your system. They're going to deliver it through phishing or bad links or however it ends up happening. They're going to exploit the vulnerability. They're going to install their command and control stuff. They're going to send it commands, and they're going to be in your system, and they're going to be looking around to see how you back things up, to see your Active Directory accounts, trying to get access to as many things as possible, figuring out what they have access to without tripping alarms. And then at some point in time, they're going to pull the trigger, and they're going to do some bad stuff. So monitoring all that kind of stuff is really critical to figure that out. But that's ultimately what that timeline looks like. So this is a incident response framework by the SANS Institute. They're well known as a think tank and training institute for cybersecurity professionals. But it's preparation, identification, containment, eradication, recovery, and lesson learns. And it's a loop. So you keep feeding back your lesson learns back into your preparation, and hopefully not going around the wheel too many times. The containment, eradication, recovery are things. I haven't read the whole paper because it's like really long. But try not to think about it as a linear line, like you have to go through each phase and each gate to do it. I look at it as it's a parallel task. Like this virtual machine has a problem. We're going to contain it. We're going to eradicate the thing and see if we can bring it online, or internet services. The technologies are parallel. It isn't like, okay, we have to contain it on everything. But so the acronym, I've heard this before, and it didn't really register until I started doing more research on this, but it's pickerel. And because my brain is weird, I hear pickle. So it helps me remember what that is. And when we were going over practice sessions, one of my coworkers is like, well, isn't there a fish called a pickerel? I'm like, no. There's no fish called pickerel. You're silly. We looked it up, and there is. That's a pickerel. It's a chain pickerel. I don't know what kind of crossbreed that is, but it exists. So, here's another way to look at it, like instant response phases. They're all very similar. It's kind of whatever one you want to attune to and like make plans for. But I think the most interesting part of that graphic is the incident management. It's basically project management across the entire thing. If you've ever been in an incident, your first phone calls, you'll have a couple of nerds on the phone to talk to cybersecurity for it. You'll have like counsel on the phone, and then you'll usually have a project manager that's helping you pick, like, okay, we're gonna have a cadence call twice a day until we get to a certain point, and then here's the timeline of when we're gonna give updates and who's going to do that kind of stuff, because it's easy for technical people to just dig into the weeds and just do stuff. But people need to know, like, when is the internet's gonna be coming back on, or ask questions about when is payroll happening? Are we able to pay our bills? Do that kind of stuff. So you need somebody who can focus on some of the other non-nerdy stuff. There's plenty of people who can do that kind of stuff, but focusing on, I need feedback on this report. I need an update so I can provide it to the stakeholders, the business owners, because they're not gonna know what's going on, but I can translate to them that, hey, this is still happening, internet's still down, it may not be back up until tomorrow. They can make business decisions on that information. If you just leave it up to us nerds, we'll forget to do that. So just generically, a scenario we're talking about here is like a manufacturing company with a couple of sites, a number of servers and workstations. They have on-prem backups with off-site backups at a remote site, no cloud backup in this case. They found ransom notes on some file shares and some workstations, and they found that the data and the shares and the virtual machines are encrypted. So just overarching, it's kind of to help frame when we think about these types of scenarios. So in this, here's a kind of a timeline. Like originally when I started getting involved with some incident responses, I expected you pick up the phone and you call somebody and somebody would start helping you right away. Like I mentioned, I've seen it be like 36 hours. And that was because there was a problem with the cybersecurity insurance and premium payments and some other stuff. So it's important to make sure you have all that stuff clear. I've also seen it where we didn't know who to call. And the number on the website said, leave a message, we'll call you back in the morning. And then we eventually found somebody like, no, there's a 24-hour line, call that. But you wasted time, and time can cost you money when it comes down to this. So if we just kind of look at this made-up timeline, incidents reported, okay, you're kind of digging into it, or it's probably more of an event, like somebody's locked out their account, or the computer's acting weird. This weird piece of software is asking for credentials on their system. They don't think about it. They eventually, call the help desk and go, oh, this is kind of weird. You get on the system and go, that's not cool. We're going to have to do something about that. So, you contact your cybersecurity insurance and you're waiting for a callback. You're waiting for like that engagement because there's contracts to sign. You have to, there's parts of this that we know about, me as a technician know about, but I'm not directly involved in because the insurance company and the business have that relationship. I'm the geek on the other side of it. We're not involved because some of these are privileged conversations. At some point in time, law enforcement's involved. So there's certain parts of this I can't speak directly to, but in the meantime, you should have somebody help you, collect and protect logs, backups. You can start changing credentials as fast as possible. So, if there's compromised accounts, you can look through your system to see if people have been added to like the domain administrators group. That account's weird. Let's prove that out because that's going to start causing stumbling blocks for anybody who's still in your system. Backups, critical. Find your backups and save them as fast as possible. Probably turn off the internet. I haven't heard of the guidance being like turning off the internet's bad. You worry about some sort of kill switch that if they can't communicate with their command and control thing, that more bad things are going to happen. I haven't heard that that's bad advice. Pretty much every time it's like, yep, shut off the internet. So while we're waiting, this example waited a long time to sign agreements and start off an IR call. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to deploy agents. Every IR firm is going to have their flavor of agents. It's usually SentinelOne. And then it's your job to install that agent on all of your things. So if you have 5 sites and there's really no technical staff at those remote sites, how are you going to push that agent to those computers? Sometimes it's a USB stick and run around and doing that. So there's those types of activities that happen, and then that gives them the foothold to stop more things from happening and to start collecting information. And then through that process, forensics happens, and that is can take a really long time. And if you don't have firewall logs, if they've erased some of those types of bits of evidence, it makes it harder for them to know what happened and how they got into the system. And that is critical because you don't want it to happen again. You want to make sure that if however they got in, you fix it so they can't get back in, because it happens all the time that somebody will go through an IR and they didn't fix the root cause, and it's about 2 weeks later and it happens again. And that's really double bad. So the forensics happen, and it's weird. It kind of reminds me of, I was ruined for healthcare watching like ER and that kind of stuff. I'm old. And you're like, oh, I'm sick. I'm going to go to the doctor. And you see a specialist, and by the end of the episode, you're fixed. Where reality is, if you're sick and you go to the doctor, they're like, oh, we can get you to see a specialist in 5 weeks. But I'm sick. Shouldn't I see somebody right now? He'll be fine, probably. Let us know if it gets worse. So that's kind of the forensic part. Like, we've had incidents where Hey, what'd you find? We don't know yet. Okay, we need to know, like we need to move on and get things going again. So, that part can take a really long time. And then after they do some forensics, and then you're kind of watching your environment. You're making sure no more stuff happens. So, and then at some point in time, you can start recovering things. You're recovering laptops, do that kind of stuff. And then at the end of it, you get a report that kind of gives you, what happened. And, I haven't got to see any of those because those are privileged and confidential, but somebody gets a report that says, this is how it happened. Here's how they got in the system, those types of things. So, but if you look at, there's kind of the timeline on the bottom. If it happened today, 6 days maybe when your internet comes back. How are you going to operate as a business if you don't have internet for 6 days? So we're going to step through like the Pickrell incident response plan. So preparations, like things you can do. End user training, people are always going to get phished. Train them to look for weird things. Like one example is we had an owner, a CFO, on his computer, something got installed, and a box popped up and says, enter your credentials. And it's the same type of annoying thing, like your account's kind of locked out, or you need to re-authenticate to this thing. But it was janky looking, and they had already been through some incidents, so he stopped and went, that doesn't look right. And he closed it, and it popped back up. And he closed it, and it popped back up. And eventually he went, that's weird, I'm going to call somebody. And somebody had got a remote control software and installed this app, and they were trying to steal his credentials to get into the other stuff to probably do a wire, because they didn't do anything else on the network. They were just phishing that person because they knew on the website he was the CFO. So tabletop walkthroughs. In the last couple of Envisions, I've done like a choose your own adventure, just kind of like a light tabletop kind of thing, like, hey, you see this. Do you want to do this or this? Like that's a light kind of tabletop exercise. You can do something more involved than that. Anything to kind of think through what would you do if these types of things happen is important, and involve the business folks, because we're going to think about technical things and we forget, like, hey, payday's on Tuesday. What happens if we can't get paid? What exceptions do we have to make to try to make sure people get fed? Those types of things are really important. Deploy monitoring tools, know who your cybersecurity insurance is. They're going to have a list of vendors of IR firms that you can work with, or they're going to recommend. Know how to get a hold of them, know who they are. That just shortens that cycle so you can start working on things faster. Continuous education, kind of paying attention to coming to events like this, or paying attention to whatever security feeds and stuff you want to collect information, talk to other businesses. Other businesses are going to see things or go through events, try to learn from those types of things. And no matter how many tools you buy, it isn't a guarantee it's going to save you. I could sell you every single thing, and if you miss it on one workstation and somebody clicks on the wrong thing on that workstation, that machine can be compromised. The rest of the thing should catch it, defense in depth. But if you think that you're going to buy one SKU of something and it's going to fix it, Arctic Wolf is a great example. They do a great job, SOC, that kind of thing. But if you don't have the agent on some critical devices, those devices can get compromised. They'll see some sort of traffic at some point, but is it too late? What happens in the meantime? That kind of thing. So identification usually comes through like monitoring, defense in depth, alerting, understanding normal. I've been working with a customer who I called on a Friday afternoon, and their internet was really slow. And it was like, well, okay, whatever. We got in the firewall, took a look at it, and you could see the traffic graphs that the CPU was overtaxed. The firewall's too busy. Like, well, did you buy more internet? Is there something early to reboot the firewall? It happened. It came back in like half an hour. When we looked at the graphs, it was all outbound traffic. So that was an indication that somebody was in the process of stealing all their stuff. So that was one way we could figure it out. So if you understand what normal is, like usually our internet traffic kind of looks like this, but out, if you're not the type of business that publishes a bunch of things or uploads videos or that kind of stuff, that's weird. Having an idea what weird is important. When you talk about alerting, alerts should go to a team. If alerts goes to one person, that person gets to go on vacation occasionally or get sick. If it goes in an inbox, nobody sees it. Nobody knows. And if you do spread it out across a group, they should be educated on what they should do. Because it's easy to see an alert and go, that's a bunch of technical stuff. I don't know what that means. Do I do something? Do I not do something? Who do I contact? Who do I get support from internally? Like, having somebody to call and say, hey, this looks weird, and get, nope, it's fine. This is what happens. But knowing how to escalate something if they don't know what to do, instead of just going, I don't know what to do. And the other side of it, they can't just push the panic button every time something weird comes in, because that just causes a lot of chaos. So like the next three are colored. I consider this like parallel activities, because it isn't like we're going to step through these like gates, because it doesn't work, because there's too many different technology stacks for that to work. So, in containment, like I mentioned, like Sentinel-1 will typically be deployed, or some other sort of agent. Start changing passwords, locking down accounts, looking for new accounts in the system, a bunch of things like that. If you have an idea of what it is, so think a firewall vendor had a SSL VPN compromise that was actively exploited on the internet, and you didn't do that, patch that thing first, because that is very likely how they got on the system. So if you can figure out what that is, that's what the IR team is for, is to do forensics and find out preferably what the point of entry is and patch that as fast as you can. And then in this process, you're heavily restricting or disconnecting internet access. So make sure you've contained your endpoints before reestablishing connections. It is easy to miss stuff, and every one of us has stuff on your network that you forget about. There's the postal machine in the basement, or there's NVRs sitting on a wall somewhere. I've seen a situation where, kind of model off the scenario is 3 sites, everything was kind of had malware on it. They disconnect the network, the WAN connections between the sites. They had thought they had cleared one of the remote sites, so they pull up the connection, and it took about an hour, and some endpoints on that remote connection were starting to re-encrypt data that we had already started to restore. So that is a hard stop. You disconnect the connection, you have to re-verify everything on the other side, and you've just wasted a bunch of time. So things to think about: be very complete and diligent about finding all of those things. And then, in containment, you're protecting and collecting logs and backups. IR team can't do a lot of forensics if you have no information to give them. Or they'll do their best, but it makes it sometimes really hard to find out what happened. If it isn't just, I clicked on a thing, or there's an exploit, sometimes you don't really know. We think it's this. Do your best. So in the process of eradication, patch everything else. If you haven't been real diligent about doing Windows updates, do Windows updates on everything, because if nothing else, it just raises the bar and gets rid of vulnerabilities that may be used. Remove the malware on systems. It is very likely, if a system's affected, depending on your insurance company, they may say, we don't trust that anymore, you have to rebuild it and restore the data. If you can't go back far enough to backups, or know for sure when it started and you can't go back that far, okay, you get new domain controllers, and we're going to clear the files individually and put the files back. That's a lot of work. And then you constantly scanning the network, looking for more weird stuff that's happening. And sometimes it's easier to re-image the PC than it is to remove the malware. We did a session about autopilot. That makes it pretty easy. But if you don't have that type of method, it's a USB stick. Next, per machine. And we've seen an IR, a very recent one, we had to rebuild 80 laptops out of 186. That takes a lot of time and slows everything down. And it's really expensive, labor-wise. So, and then if you have to rebuild systems or software, do you know how to reinstall the software? Some of us use antiquated old things that can't be recreated. And if you, I had all the installers stored on the file server that's now encrypted, and that's a bad time. It is less and less with SaaS applications and cloud services and things like that, but it's come up. So in recovery, it's pretty self-explanatory. You're recovering like servers and files. You're bringing internet services online, maybe specific to like the payroll system. Like if payroll has to go out today, okay, we're gonna clean this workstation, we're gonna allow this workstation to go out for as long as it takes to finish payroll, and we're gonna close it back down. So that's kind of how the containment eradication recovery happens. That device is now separate than all the other devices. Nobody else gets internet, but this one does because we all like money. So we need to pay our bills and we need to pay the people. So restores can take a really long time. I don't know if anybody's gone through and tested restores recently. We all think like Veeam is great for instant VM recovery, things like that. But in this scenario, the company was doing backups locally and backups offsite. Good, you want to do that, but they weren't immutable. So they roasted one array and the other one they almost got. And because they had missed eradicating PCs on the other side, the WAN connection wasn't down. So they were shuffling 12 terabyte USB hard drives about 35 miles. And we don't have to do it very often, but copying large Veeam backups off of USB 2.0 large disks, just that copy takes a really long time before you start the restore. So that wasn't a great situation, but that comes out through testing your business continuity and your disaster recovery plans. And then hopefully your backups include all of your data. It is easy when in a very dynamic, fast-moving team, if somebody's like, hey, I'm gonna create, I need to do this thing, I need this, okay, we gotta buy some more servers, or we gotta buy more space. I found this place, I'm gonna copy it there. What if that's not included in the backups? I've seen a situation where a folder named archive was moved onto a thing that wasn't backed up because it was labeled archive and nobody thought it was important. But unfortunately, business processes, some people were copying all of their production stuff that they work on every day into this folder. And when bad happened, none of it was backed up. So I think we were able to send the drives because they weren't, in that case, they weren't encrypted. They had just wiped the RAID on the NAS appliance. Luckily, I think we were able to send the drives down to OnTrack. They were able to recompile the data and get the array going and give us the data back. But that's a case where make sure you know where all your things are. So, lessons learned. At some point, you're going to receive a forensic report. I don't particularly know how detailed they are. Like I said, I haven't got to see any of them yet. Sometimes we'll get a summary of what happened, like, hey, this wasn't patched, or this type of thing happened on this particular system. But you'll get that type of report. You want to coach your employees what to say. Because if this is an extended type of thing with social media and all those types of things, you don't want to panic your customers. You want to control the message that's happening. It's almost impossible because somebody, and nowadays, if I'm connecting to, if I see a service or something and like, oh, our systems are down for maintenance, it's 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. I'm pretty sure you didn't plan maintenance on 10 a.m. on Tuesday. And it extends and it goes on. Okay, we all probably know what's happening. So, or it was a really bad maintenance window that started the night before, and that's also really crappy. But having a plan on how to coach employees, like if this does happen again, here's what you should say, which is probably nothing. Employees, redirect them to managers. The managers should be coached if a customer is like, we're having system issues, that kind of stuff, because depending on your industry, regulated or not, like you don't want to say something that panics anybody. You don't want to say bad things. You don't want your name in the news, any of that kind of stuff, because PR, customer reputation, all of that's really important. And then at some point in time, and depending if your data is compromised, so it's not just necessarily what happens is they encrypt your stuff and they get a ransom and get you to pay money. They're also going to try to steal all your information, all your private information on your partners and your customers, and then double ransom you. Like, oh, we encrypt all your stuff. Hey, you're gonna have to pay this so you can use your stuff again. And they'll come back later and go, oh yeah, by the way, we also have all your customer information. And they're like, you should pay us so we don't pass that out. Oh, and by the way, we have all your customer information. We're going to talk to each of your customers, and depending on the industry, we're going to blackmail them so we don't release that information. Because there's no honor among thieves, and this is a criminal enterprise. They're going to try to maximize their profitability and all of these types of activities. So outside of the report and all of these activities, what changes are you going to make? And depending on what happened, it'd be like, okay, we need to do a better job of patching these things, or these firewalls are old and out of date, we can't patch them, we have to replace them, or we need to do a better job of phishing training or things like that. What changes are you going to make? You will have the very direct attention of the business owners. So that's the time to say, hey, here's things we should pay attention to, which is also the same thing I told you 6 months ago and 2 years ago that we should be changing, but it wasn't important then, it's real important now. So usually that's a good time to take advantage of that attention and to do mindful, efficient ways to improve your security overall. And considerations is, at the same time of all of this technical stuff, there are humans involved in all of this. And if it's somebody who clicked on the wrong thing, they know they shouldn't have clicked on it. At this point in time, nobody is not aware that they shouldn't click on a link. Even a well-crafted email, they're like, I should know better. That has an emotional toll on people, especially if they know it's costing the company money. They know it's causing downtime. And if you think about it, if you're any normal person, you're going to feel guilty. You're going to feel bad. And even if it doesn't necessarily feel like you get that kind of pressure in your organization, I've talked to some customers who have gone through some of this stuff, and the person who accidentally did something was like, should I quit? Like, should I hand in my resignation letter? Like, it was crushing. They'd been there years, and they were willing to just walk away because they wanted to fall on the sword because that had happened. And I've heard another customer going through the same type of situation and wouldn't go into the break room because everybody's sitting around, there's nothing to do, just embarrassed and stressed out and knows how much money is costing the company. So the emotional toll of the people who do things is important to be human about, right? Our users are not dumb. They all know how to do things. Treating them as children isn't going to be helpful, and it isn't very human at the end of the day. And then, in an IR, be mindful of how many hours people are working, because it's easy to try to dig in and go 24 hours, 36 hours, but at some point in time, you're going to start making mistakes. So having a plan about, okay, you have it for these 12 hours, and I'm going to handle the updates and stuff for the next 12 hours, and working through those types of things, because we all have lives. We all, it's having done this from a provider standpoint. We're in one right now, and it's at the tail end, but 5 days were shot. Like 1 or 2 technicians on site, waiting for updates and doing things. Well, that puts everybody else's projects, and that's stress on the family, and everybody has personal lives and stuff. So the whole thing is be mindful of those types of stuff. So, what can we do? It's pretty standard fare. The advice really doesn't change. Review your incident response plan, or hopefully have an incident response plan. If you don't have one, I don't care if it's 3 steps. Starting with something, having an idea of who to talk to. Here's the team that we're going to work with and talk through how this would impact the business, because it's easy to be a technician and only care about the beeps and boops. But I have seen an incident happen to a manufacturing company, and about 4 days in, they realized it wasn't going to get cleared out, and they furloughed the entire manufacturing plant for 2 weeks. That means nobody got paid for 2 weeks. And that is, like, on my side of it, I'm instantly stressed because I understand what that means. I've been in a situation where it happened on payday, and a company almost missed paying 600 people. Talking to the other business departments about what's important to them, and they'll say everything's important. So getting somebody to decide, yeah, that's not as important, that's real important. We're going to pay attention to that when things come up. Test your backups, make them immutable, get them out of the building. Firsthand, I have seen cloud backups completely save an organization because they roasted the NAS, they roasted the local backups. It takes a little longer to restore. We had everything from the night before. So that's your best defense to protect everything, is make sure your backups are working, know how to use them. Patch all the things as often as possible. Pay attention to critical vulnerabilities, especially at the edge. Your firewalls, anything that touches the internet, VPN connections. We all deal in a world where everybody's working from home on probably uncontrolled devices next to their kids' Xboxes and other things. It's not the castle and the moat thing. It's everything is connecting all the time. So have a methodology to patch everything as much as possible, and prioritizing external services. Prioritize not just like CVE10s, but things that are actively being exploited. Focus on that kind of stuff, and then kind of worry about like the rest of the things. I don't care about printers because printers are frustrating and evil devices. But at the same time, they have vulnerabilities too. Las Vegas Casino got hacked because of a internet-connected temperature thermometer in one of their giant aquariums. So those things matter too. At the same time, isolate networks, separate the internet thermometer from the casino machines. Probably a good step for them. Run an incident tabletop exercise. It doesn't have to be fancy. Shameless plug, we've done 2 Choose Your Own Adventures. They're out on YouTube. Have your team watch it, have your business managers watch it. It's not very technical. It just kind of walks through making decisions and the impact of making certain decisions or not making decisions. That's something to start the conversation, to start thinking through it. You can go on from there. If you're a regulated industry, this is old hat. You have to do that kind of stuff on a regular basis. But there's plenty of different ways to make it not super boring and not very technical. It's just like, hey, if the internet got shut off for 2 weeks, what do we do? That's my favorite tabletop exercise, little D&D. So, and then make sure your cybersecurity insurance company, how to get a hold of them, know what's coming down the road, because I've heard from a lot of our customers like, well, if I have a cybersecurity incident, I'm just going to call you. We appreciate your business, but I can't run your IR. We're not trained or staffed to do that on a very competent level. I love our team. We all do a great job, but the people that do this for a living are much better at it than we are. They have much different tools than we have. We can do our best, but the risk is if your cybersecurity company has a specific list of IR firms that they want you to use, and we're not on that list, they may not pay for our services. That means you're paying for our services out of pocket, and we're expensive. The IR that we're currently working on, we have 268 hours on it. That's a lot of billable hours. And we're one of 3 teams that are working on it. So this is a very expensive activity. So finding out who your teams are, figuring out who you can call and how to get a hold of them, really important. So that's all I have. Here's how to get a hold of me. Does anybody have any questions?
I asked this a year or so ago, and I'm wondering if the answer has changed at all. If something is obviously wrong, something has started, what's step number 1 to try to minimize the spread?
I would say the first step is to contain, like unplug that computer from the network, start looking for other things that it may have been affected, find your backups and isolate those as fast as possible. Hopefully, you're getting the reports, you're knowing that they're running, because I've seen organizations where they modified the backup jobs to not include anything important. So you're getting your alerts like, oh, your backups are successful, except for all of your really important virtual machines aren't in them. And they waited for the backups to age out, and then you don't have anything, you got empty jobs. So I would say isolating stuff, and I give out prizes for questions, so. Anybody?
Mike, what do you have advice? Somebody asked me earlier today.
You don't get a prize.
I'm your prize.
Gift that keeps on giving.
Question from earlier today. How do what would be our advice for how to prevent the CFO from clicking on a DocuSign that is loaded with malicious intent? Meaning, is there a way to sort them? How do they know what's real? How do they know what's not? Said CFO gets 12 to 15 DocuSigns in a day, and they don't know what DocuSign is real and what DocuSign is not. Anything, Vice?
So it starts with like customer education, and like, were you expecting this? This seems suspect. Like looking at the the standard things like a misspelled domain name, bad English, or bad grammar, or emails from me would count to. So anything that looks weird, if you've done it long enough, you know what you're supposed to be expecting. You can do that through like phishing campaigns. Hopefully email filters are going to catch things, but if it's a specially targeted thing, it's probably going to get through. At this point, kind of the best thing is like zero trust things. So even if you were to have Threat Locker, which is a zero trust type of product on the really important machines, basically what Threat Locker does is it monitors advice and says, here are the applications I'm expecting. Any application I'm not expecting does not run. So in this case, if somebody had clicked on something and downloaded it and clicked on it, it wouldn't run. They would get an alert. Now it's going to catch things that aren't expected, so somebody's actively installing things, but it puts a pause in it and says, this is going to make an alert. It's going to go to the help desk, or it's going to go to an IT person to go, did you mean to run this? This looks odd, and it just stops it cold. So I think that's a pretty good way to do it. And I don't know, it's great if you have it on everything, but the people that do wire transfers and the money and that kind of stuff, starting there is a pretty good thing.
Thank you. Any other questions? Got to be one more. Yes, excellent.
This threat locker that you're talking about, does it prevent things from being open within your browser and running on that? Like DocuSign would be in browser from your email, someone sending you a DocuSign link.
So that has a web content filter in it, but it does a very good job of anything that executes. So like it's not like a form in a web page. At some point in time, it's going to try to run something on a computer. It is supposed to do that kind of stuff. Usually what ends up happening is that link will download Screen Connect or other remote support tool, which are generally green-lit and safe. They're not making their own malicious remote control tools. They're just using what's available. So Screen Connect, any of those available things, they're just taking it and recompiling it to talk to them instead of a valid service. So they pass a lot of filters, like, oh, this Screen Connect's a valid app. We use it for, people will use it for remote support, software vendors, that kind of stuff. So it's usually green-lit. But the Threat Locker, in this case, you could say by like hash of the application or where it was downloaded, those are okay, but this one isn't. So I would throw this, but it's not going to make it all the way. Nice. I'll take you.
Mike, thank you. Very well done. Appreciate it. Really good session. There's no other questions. We'll adjourn here. It's getting hot in here, right? Sorry, y'all. Wish there was a way to control the room. Whoop, one more question.
I've been to a lot of the conferences, stuff like that. The discussion always seems to surround around being, defensive. How do you stop them from getting in? How do you look for them? See, if you're looking at logs and you see things happening, is there a offense that you can go? Is there something you could do to fight back? Websites you can go to. Here's an IP address that I'm seeing hitting me 50 times in an hour trying to log in. Here's the IP of it. Is there anything you can do offensively to fight back?
So there are some firewall brands that have services in it. They will subscribe to a list, let's say. Gray Noise is one that I've seen that you can subscribe, and they will publish a list to certain firewalls and automatically make a rule that these are known malicious IP addresses and domain names, and they all look like, they're this long, they all look like junk, and they'll update a rule in your firewall automatically. So it wouldn't be something that you would trigger, but it would kind of basically do the same thing, because when you think about it, all HTTPS out, usually nothing in. But if something is actually coming through, like geo-blocking is a really good thing. Like if you don't expect anybody to connect from Taiwan, just don't allow anybody with IP addresses registered in Taiwan to ever connect. You know, it isn't. It is something you'd set up ahead of time, but if you did see something in an event, some firewalls will have some like block this traffic, and it'll just make a rule to say anything from this address. The problem is with geo-blocking, like 10, 15 years ago, it was great because there wasn't, everything was coming from other countries. Now, a computer lab in Texas is where most of this stuff is coming from. So it's hard to say, like, okay, we're going to allow the United States, but they have data pods or the VPN from somewhere else through a point of presence, and it's going to come from the United States. So that isn't good enough anymore.
365, they can come from anywhere.
Yep, with conditional access, you can make a conditional access rule to block other countries. So it does help catch, I won't say the lazy ones, but the easier ones to spot, but you can do that too. And you still, sometimes we've seen that happen where business email compromise, somebody was trying to register a 365 mailbox with a legitimate service that allows you to log in and see all of your email from different places in one web page, was using a service like that was hosted in Taiwan. Well, that happened to trip because it was outside the United States. So you can kind of see that's helpful in that kind of stuff. But conditional access is a feature of Entra ID Plan 1, so you have to have the right license to have it, or you add that license. It's in Business Premium, so if you have that, it's already there. It's just a matter of making the rules. Did you get a pickle? So, if there's nothing else, have a good day. I should have asked questions. We got a pickle.